Hello, and welcome back to Cayenne Pepper Commentary, your home for football-related news. Week 2 of the NFL is wrapped up, so let's cover it game by game. I apologize for everything I said about the Packers' chance without Micah Parsons last week. He was an absolute force to be reckoned with, and this Packers defense ripped Jaden Daniels and the Commanders to shreds. Deebo Samuel looked alright, having what felt like a better game than star receiver Terry McLaurin, but the Commanders' offense was struggling. 15 of their 18 points were scored in the fourth quarter when the game was already sealed, and even when they got good opportunities, they were botched, including 2 missed field goals that would have put them in striking distance for this game. On the opposite side of the field, the Packers' offense looked unstoppable. Tucker Kraft had a career high in receiving yards, the most by a Packers tight end since 2015, and was aided by running back Josh Jacobs, totaling 84 yards and a touchdown on the ground. This Green Bay team is a scary contender this year, especially with the added pass rush with Parsons, but will they lose to the 49ers in the playoffs? I genuinely feel sorry for Cam Ward. During some points of the game, it feels like he's genuinely on the field by himself, like that one South Park clip. He gets no blocks, and when he actually has time to throw the ball, his receivers don't even try to hold on to it. The Tennessee defense looked okay during the first half, but come the fourth quarter, they also just gave up. Allowing 2 touchdowns in the last 10 minutes of a game when you are only down 4 is just another killer for your rookie quarterback's confidence, and it will continue digging a bigger hole. For the Rams, this was just business as usual, a slower first half before turning it on and stretching the lead late. They do lose cornerback Ahkello Witherspoon, which could be a painful loss when they play a loaded receiver room in Philadelphia in their playoff rematch next week, but this team still looks solid, even though they'll have to keep up in what is a nearly undefeated NFC West. Yikes for both teams. For Cincy fans, your star quarterback goes down for the second year in a row, leaving you once more with backup Jake Browning, and for Jags fans, you just blew a lead to backup Jake Browning, and it's not even the first time. This game was a thriller from start to finish, and if I'm a Jaguars fan, I honestly don't blame my defense for that last drive. They forced 3 interceptions, one of them being in the last 5 minutes of the game on the Cincinnati 12-yard line, and your offense still can't put the game away. Rookie head coach Liam Cohen tries to be ballsy and finish it instead of extending their lead to 6 on a quarterback who had only scored once in the game. Of course, in the end, that didn't matter with the defense ultimately giving up the touchdown, but it still baffles me. For the Bengals fans, my words from last week still stick, but less so. Defense looked more concerning than offense this week, which is to be expected, but losing Joe Burrow is a potential season ender. He'll be back in a few weeks, but can Jake Browning keep the ship afloat with this star-studded offense? They face 4 top-tier defenses in the next month, including the Packers and Broncos, who are both contenders for the number 1 defense spot, so this schedule is as much a concern as Burrow's injury. Absolutely nobody should be surprised about the outcome of this game. This was a classic example of one team just being better than another. Credit to the Browns in any way I can. They kept the game decently close during the first half and held the Ravens' offense to 20 points in the first 3 quarters, but when your defense is on the field constantly, there's only so much you can do. Come quarter 4, it all fell apart. Lamar Jackson tacked on 2 touchdown passes to end the game with a total of 4. For any Browns faithful that still exist, I'd strap in. This is going to be a long year, and it will not get any better. Baltimore, though, has to walk into the hometown of their kryptonite next week to take on the Chiefs, which will be a good way to measure either how good Baltimore is or how much Kansas City has actually fallen off. Similarly to the Browns and Ravens game, this is a case of a dominant team just really giving it to their division rival. At no point in time could you even consider this game close, with the Jets' only touchdown coming from a garbage time Tyrod Taylor pass. I think the Jets' strategy in this game was to try and sideline Josh Allen, which worked for 2 plays until he decided a bloody nose can't stop him and proceeded to torch them with a grapefruit attached to his face. This game was not won by Josh Allen, though, with James Cook being the real threat for most of the game. Totaling 132 yards on the ground on 6.3 yards per carry and 2 touchdowns, Cook had an absolute field day on this New York defense. Though having a pretty solid performance in Week 1, Jets quarterback Justin Fields was pulled in the fourth quarter to be checked for a concussion while only being 3 for 11 through the air on the day. This was a Buffalo defensive masterclass, which is a major confidence boost after allowing Baltimore to put 40 on them. I have to hand it to the Dolphins. They looked slightly better this week, at least offensively than they did last week. That is not a very high bar to jump over, but at this point, I'll take anything if I'm Miami. Defensively, however, they looked atrocious, allowing Drake May to throw for 230 yards and 2 touchdowns, only missing on 4 of his passes. May also tallied a rushing touchdown onto his stat line, pushing Miami further into a hole. This, coupled with a fourth quarter kick return, was enough to put the Dolphins away. Offensively for Miami, they actually performed pretty well, with Tua scoring a pair of touchdowns, but unfortunately his nickname precedes him when he throws an interception with less than 3 minutes remaining. They also were gifted points from their special teams right before New England's kick return, with a punt return of their own. An exciting fourth quarter, but the Dolphins have to work on their defense, especially with a game against Josh Allen and the Bills this week. My brother texted me after this game in a string of words I never thought I'd hear. Mac Jones balled out this week. Thing is, he's not wrong. The 49ers coaching staff wasn't afraid of letting Jones sling the rock, totaling 39 pass attempts, but it also paid off, with the backup quarterback throwing for 3 touchdowns. This is with an injured 49ers roster as well, with George Kittle, Jawan Jennings, Kyle Juszczyk, and offensive lineman Ben Barth all going down. The injuries have been a consistent problem with San Francisco, though, and it puts their training room into question. But with all the upside of the 49ers offense, it brings into question how this New Orleans team played. Offensively, the Saints actually didn't look too bad. Spencer Rattler had an arguably better game than Mac Jones, and Kamara was doing his work on the ground. They did have some fumble trouble, losing the ball 3 times, but only one of those ended up actually going to the defense. Defensively, they also didn't do too terribly, getting a fumble out of Mac Jones. This was a shockingly contested game, but hopefully the 49ers roster recovers in time to put them in true midseason form. What even was this game? Never in my life was I expecting to see the Russell Wilson-led Giants get in a shootout with this Cowboys roster. What was a pretty average divisional game between the two teams through 3 quarters exploded when it got to the 4th, tallying 41 points between the two teams. Brandon Aubrey saves the Cowboys with a 64-yarder to tie at the end of regulation and a 46-yarder to put the game away. Russell Wilson decided to have the game of his life, completing 30 of his 41 passes and throwing for 3 touchdowns on a 450-yard day. Eventually, though, the strategy of throw it deep to Malik Neighbors faltered, ending up being the only interception of his day, and it was on their last overtime drive to give the Cowboys the win. Human bowling ball and rookie Cam Skattebo also had a good day for the Giants on the ground, with 4.1 yards per carry on 11 touches and a touchdown. The Cowboys had similar stats offensively, with Dak Prescott throwing 52 passes, with 2 of them ending in touchdowns. Their ground game was carried by Javonte Williams, who was just 3 yards shy of a 100-yard game, but got a touchdown to make it up, with Miles Sanders also running in for 6 for Dallas. Both of these teams should offensively be happy with their performances, but there's a lot of things that need to be addressed defensively. So, I was wrong about Ben Johnson. I suppose the Detroit coaching staff heard those rumors swirling all offseason with them only gaining steam in Week 1 and wanted to put those to rest. This game was over by halftime, but in classic Dan Campbell fashion, he continued to run up the score as much as possible, still tacking on touchdowns deep into the 4th. Jared Goff threw for the same amount of touchdowns as he had incompletions with 5 and totaling 334 yards through the air. Sonic and Knuckles both secured themselves a touchdown on the ground as well in the rout of the Bears. Chicago honestly didn't have a terrible game offensively, though. Obviously, they have things to improve on, especially with turnover trouble, with both a lost fumble and an interception in the first half, but they looked better than last week. Morale was clearly down in the second half, which caused Chicago to lose some steam and let this game slip even further out of reach. There's only so much you can do as a team when you're allowing the opponent to drop 52 on your head. Lions get a massive boost in confidence with this win before having to go to Baltimore, and pray that the loss of defensive end Marcus Davenport doesn't hurt them too much. Well, I guess Aaron Rodgers left his black magic at home for this game. I don't want to say this was a dominant win by the Seahawks when their score only looks this good because Caleb Johnson, the Steelers' kick returner, forgot how football works and watched a live ball roll into his end zone. He didn't even question why the opposing players were still running full speed for the ball. He just let it go and started jogging to the sideline. This does not excuse Seattle's poor play offensively, with Sam Darnold throwing 2 interceptions in the first half and Zach Charbonnet having 0.7 yards per carry on 15 carries. Granted, Kenneth Walker looked like he was ready to take back his lead role for the Seahawks, absolutely gashing the Steelers' run defense for 105 yards and a touchdown. Seahawks should have lost this game, but Aaron Rodgers decided to revert to Jets form, pulling up only 3 points in the second half and throwing 2 costly interceptions. Obviously the same amount as his counterpart, but when you're trailing by 2 scores and hoping for a comeback, it's just something you can't afford. The Seahawks win this one and get an easy game next week against the Saints, but we'll have to see how Sam Darnold gets over his interception problem. As much as I want to say this game was an Indiana Jones masterclass and he put up a crazy stat line, I just can't. This game was won by Jonathan Taylor, Colts kicker Spencer Schrader, and a little bit of luck. Broncos offensively actually had a fantastic game. Bo Nix, for the most part, fixed his turnover troubles from last week, except for a single interception in the fourth that did allow the Colts to be within striking distance. There's just only so much you can do as an offense when the opposing kicker hits 5 field goals on you. 3 touchdowns for the sophomore QB, and a single rushing touchdown for J.K. Dobbins on the ground. There's not much to complain about. If Will Lutz just hits that 42-yard kick, the game is over, but unfortunately that's where the Colts' luck comes in. His kick goes off the right upright. Indy then misses their kick, but get a flag, letting Schrader get a second shot, which he drills. Broncos do look good, but with another tough game against the Chargers next week, I start to wonder when a little bit of panic sets in. For the Colts, ride the hype while you can, and hopefully you aren't the 2024 Saints. For the second week in a row, the Cardinals have snuck by in a game they should have dominated. In the Cardinals' defense, however, the only reason the score is as close it is due to a pair of touchdowns in the fourth quarter pulling the Panthers into striking range. This Arizona team is known for playing down to competition, but losing 2 corners in the closing minutes doesn't help. Bryce Young, however, changed personalities at halftime. In the first half, he looked how he did last week, turning the ball over on Carolina's first 2 drives and just being uncomfortable in the pocket. But in the second half, it looks like he was towards the end of last season. He threw 3 touchdowns and was driving down the field again before back-to-back incompletions and a sack killed the game for the Panthers. If Bryce Young keeps playing like that for the rest of the season, the Panthers have a team on their hands, but it remains to be seen if he can keep that consistency. It's a big headline this week, but for the first time in his career, Patrick Mahomes has lost 3 straight games, 2 of them being to this Philadelphia Eagles team. This game, however, was not Mahomes' fault. When you're missing your top 2 wideouts and your star tight end bobbles an easy pass that should be a touchdown but instead gets picked off, there's not much you can do. Philadelphia pulls off another close game, being almost fully shut down on offense. Their touchdowns come from the ground with dual threat Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts both cashing one in. Hurts, however, struggled in the air, only passing for 101 yards and only getting 11 points for my fantasy team. But the defense locked it down enough to still pull off the victory. As much as I don't want the Eagles to make it back to the Super Bowl, the fact that they can have less than 250 yards offensively and still win is scary, especially when you know this offense has the capability to do more than that on a productive day. Watch out for a repeat. I would make the same joke as last week and say J.J. McCarthy forgot how to throw it to Justin Jefferson, but I think he just forgot how to throw it in general. 11 for 21 with only 158 yards and 2 interceptions is a devastating stat line for the young quarterback you've placed all of your trust in. Maybe he improves when Jordan Addison returns and adds another deep threat for Minnesota, but it's not like their current receiving room is bad, especially with Justin Jefferson. Michael Penix somehow had less yards through the air than McCarthy, but who needs to pass the ball when you have the craziest running back duo to grace the earth? Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier combined for 218 yards, Robinson accounting for the majority with 143. However, the pair only accounted for 1 touchdown. That 1 touchdown, though, was the only one scored in the game, the other 15 points coming in the form of field goals. Not the prettiest game offensively, but when your defense is giving the opposing quarterback nightmares and making him throw it to God knows where, you don't need the prettiest game offensively. We'll see if Minnesota can turn it around against a worse Bengals defense next week, but this was a difficult watch. Also note how the Bears' defense somehow made McCarthy look like a good quarterback last week. Baker Mayfield may be a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. Baker Mayfield may even be a top 3 quarterback when it comes to clutch. There's something about watching a guy, through pain, through a possible injury, stand up because someone was talking shit about him. He may not have had the prettiest stat line, but when it mattered most, Mayfield stepped up and got it done. The game was mostly clean from a turnover standpoint, pretty much just a battle of punts through the second, third, and most of the fourth quarter, until Houston finally broke the stalemate with Nick Chubb's sole touchdown of the game. C.J. Stroud also had a solid game from a QBR standpoint, but getting sacked on the 2-point conversion helped the Buccaneers get ahead in this one, counting the Houston defense also folding at the wrong time. The Bucs will try to remain undefeated against an injured Jets team next week. Well, I guess you don't have to work too hard to win the game if the opposing quarterback is actively helping you out. Geno Smith threw 3 interceptions, and there's only one that you can maybe argue was the receiver's fault. The Chargers got off to a hot start with 17 points in the first half, but I think gave up when they realized they didn't need to play anymore, being held to just a field goal in the second half. I was a big defender of the Raiders for most of the offseason. I think Geno Smith has the capability to be a starting quarterback in the league, but this was just a rough game. The schedule doesn't get easier for the Silver and Black either, though. They travel to Washington next week to take on the Commanders, but we'll see if this team can bounce back from a brutal loss. Well, that's every Week 2 game. I went 12-4 this week in my preseason predictions, but I may have to start updating those as the year progresses, or I fear my record will just get worse every week. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all next week.